There we go. There we go. Okay. As always, we're going to start with a bit of a, here we go. Okay. So we're going to start with an opening meditation. Then I will introduce you to our guest, Jaime. We'll have a time for discussion, for questions and answers. We'll talk about next month's speaker, and we'll have a benediction to end the evening. So our meditation to begin is from this book. It was just released very recently by Nikita Gill. These are the words. Fearless verse to find your voice. I really like this one because it has different poems for different seasons of the year, different seasons in your life. Just all the different moments when you might need to find a poem just for that feeling. And I really liked this one for tonight specifically. So we're going to tonight, instead of using it kind of as like an opening prayer, we're going to do it in the style of Lectio Divina. So I'm going to read it. And you just kind of listen, just see what you notice. There'll be a few minutes to pause. Then I'm going to read it through again. That second time, you will kind of pick up on one thought or one image or one word or one phrase that sticks with you and meditate on that. And then I'll read it through a third time and just kind of thinking about that one word, phrase, picture that seems really significant to you. Just see kind of in your body, in your mind, in your spirit, what kind of comes out of it and just what you notice. You don't have to have learn anything by the end of it. You don't have to feel a certain way. It's just the practice of hearing the words and just noticing what happens. So the first time is just listen. The second time is see what sticks out to you. And the third time is notice how, as you hear the thoughts and the words that stick out to you again, just what you're observing within yourself. So Healing is Not Linear by Nikita Gill. It knows how to take its time, so be patient with yourself. For you, like the earth, need the same nourishment and time that it takes flowers to bloom, wilt, and bloom all over again. It knows how to take its time, so be patient with yourself. For you, like the earth, need the same nourishment and time that it takes flower to bloom, wilt, and bloom all over again. It knows how to take its time, so be patient with yourself. For you, like the earth, need the same nourishment and time that it takes flower to bloom, wilt, and bloom all over again. If anyone would like to share like the phrase that came to them or anything that they noticed or observed. Anything that it reminded you of. Okay. I am so excited to introduce my friend Jaime tonight. He is a licensed professional counselor in private practice. He practices in Lubbock, Texas, and primarily treats individuals with trauma. He believes in not only symptom mitigation, but also diving deeper into the trauma creating the symptom. He's trained in eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, also known as EMDR, and is also a certified clinical trauma professional. And I'm just so happy to know Jaime. He is someone who really just over and over again has demonstrated wisdom and kindness and gentleness in every interaction. And I know I have only known him in more of a social context, so I'm really excited to really chat in a more formal way. So Jaime, welcome.
Thanks for having me, and thank you for the kind words, Becky. I'm going to be drinking out of a red Solo cup, but it only has Dr. Pepper. I promise.
Love Dr. Pepper.
Yeah. No, thanks again for having me. I'm looking forward to our time together tonight.
Yeah. So, so when you think of the work that you do in working with clients who have experienced trauma, how are you seeing the ideas of grief and spirituality kind of coming together or being parallel?
To give you some context and to kind of make that be more, I guess, real or relatable. When I decided to go back to school, I decided to get my master's back in 2014. Actually, it wasn't me that decided. It was God. He said, "You're going," and I thought he was crazy, but he's not. And I ended up going back to school to be a therapist. That same year, I was promoted to the director of cemetery at the city of Lubbock, and that was my last position before I became a therapist. And my experience with grief and being witness to grief and grief and spirituality together really started flourishing when after I became the director of the cemetery. I got to watch firsthand how different cultures, how different people walk through and experience grief. Some of the best conversations that I've ever had at the city of Lubbock, and I was there for almost 15 years. The best conversations I had were people who had recently lost their loved ones. I'm helping them pick the plot for their loved one. And at the end of the conversation, I would ask them, tell me a memory about your loved one. And they just lit up. Every family that I talked to, they would just light up and they would share a memory that stood out to them. So seeing how the process of grief intersected with the humanity of grief, that was pretty powerful. It was at that moment that I thought, okay, I'm going to be a grief therapist. And that the grief therapist lasted just for a little bit, and then I went in and dove into the trauma work. But it was a privilege to watch that firsthand, how that intersection happened.
Yeah, that's really special to be included. And with the Dagle Foundation being a grief organization, that's something that has been a theme through the support groups is witnessing grief together
Mhm.
and remembering that we're not alone. So when we kind of initially talked and you sent your thoughts of what you wanted to talk about, you sent this idea of sitting down and shutting up, and like, what is it like to support someone through grief? And I know that a lot of people are here specifically to kind of hear about that and talk about that, because even if we've grieved deeply ourselves, it can feel really overwhelming to walk with someone
Yeah.
else.
I'm writing this question down because I want to come back. What does it mean to sit down and shut up when it comes to somebody's grief?
Yeah.
But before I dive into that, I want to read a passage out of a book that I'm reading right now. It's called A Hole in the World, and it's Amanda
Oh,
Hopel's.
she was our speaker in July. So everyone who was here in July, yeah,
Yep.
got a little preview.
Yeah. So I'm reading her book right now, and there's one paragraph that I highlighted. I've highlighted it with friends.
Mm.
It says, grief is like water. It follows gravity. It finds the lowest part of you and hollows it out even more. It exploits your weaknesses. Grief goes where it wants, with or without an invitation. It seeps into the empty spaces. It cannot be harnessed or redirected, at least not easily. It branches out from the headwaters of the main event into hundreds of tributaries. Few areas of your life remain untouched. New losses are discovered almost daily. Life progresses without the one you love in it, and you miss them all over again with every new season and every turn in the road.
Mm.
The sitting down and the shutting up, at least for me, and it's been in my experience, I think it's important to find the people who are willing to get into the boat and are willing to go and navigate those tributaries with you. I think it's important to find the people that will come out of the tributaries and into that open area. And at least in my experience, take it for what you will. I always tell my clients, you can accept, reject, or modify this however you want. I'm not big on platitudes. I don't think that they don't help at all. When it comes to my grief and when it comes to my experience of sharing my grief, I just want people to listen. I just want people to be a presence. I think there's so much comfort in presence. I think there's so much comfort in, as Amanda talks about in her book, of mimicking what the other person is experiencing. So if the other person is crying, it's okay to cry. If the other person is laughing, it's okay to laugh with them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and with silence, that was tested with me. I thought about y'all when this happened to me a couple of weeks ago. I was having breakfast with a friend, and he said, and he had recently lost his mom. I think it was about 6 months ago. Well, there was another lady that lived in his town. She was 96 years old, and he considered her his second mom. And so when he was telling me about her, he said, "Yeah, it could be any minute that she'll pass." Not 2 minutes after that, his phone rang, and he got the phone call.
Wow.
He got the phone call that she had passed, and after he told me she just passed away, I just did this. I couldn't. There was nothing that was going to come out of my mouth that was going to offer him comfort.
Yeah.
But what was going to offer him comfort was just me sitting there and just me waiting on him to guide how he wanted to grieve. And that was uncomfortable. It was highly uncomfortable because I'm a helper. Those of you that are familiar with the Enneagram, I'm an Enneagram 2. I want to jump in, and I want to hold you. I want to give you the tools to get through this. I want to do this and I want to do that. And so it was a really, really big challenge for me to it was a really, really big challenge for me to just to sit back and just be a presence, of just a presence for him.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's a big part of where the grief and spirituality intersect, right? Because, we're all coming to this conversation with different faiths and different understandings of spiritual life. But if I like to think of spirituality as the ways that we connect with each other and with the divine, whether you call the divine God or whether it's the universe or something completely different. But in that moment, like, you're fighting your urges, right? To
Oh yeah,
want to smother your friend with love because you care for him.
right.
But knowing that to connect with him in this moment of grief, you needed silence.
Connection. That's a huge. That's a profound word when it comes to grief, because when we connect, I believe that when we connect with someone else's grief, or when we connect with their experience of grief, the connection doesn't have to happen with our mouth.
Yeah.
The connection does not have to happen with our mouth. The connection can happen with just being in someone's presence, or the connection can happen in bringing something for them to drink, bringing something for them to eat. The connection can still happen if people are just sitting across from each other. Maybe it's nodding. Nonverbals can be connection. The spirituality, I studied this morning in preparation of this, and it's a concept that I first heard from Richard Rohr, and it's in Christian mysticism they call it liminality, the liminal space, and being in that tension of what was and then what is to come, and in the liminal space, in the context of grief, there is that tension of, okay, I've lost my loved one. This is what was. Now I'm in this space of what is to come, and I don't know what that's going to look like. What is my life now going to look like without my loved one? What are my daily experiences going to look like without my loved one? And that being in that tension, that's a hard place to be in. It's a hard place to be in.
Yeah, because we want to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you know what the right thing is?
Well, yeah. A lot of us, I'm sure, we all learn about grief from watching others, from hearing others. We learned how to grieve when we were little, and we are learning how to grieve into adulthood. I've had to untangle what my grief used to look like growing up as a kid to what grief looks like now, because I used to be one of those ones that would offer the platitudes, and now it is shifted into, one, my training and being a therapist has informed me how to be present with people and how to just sit with people. But even then, that's evolving. That continues to evolve, and I want it to evolve. I want to be able to be that space for people where, one, they feel safe, two, they feel comfortable in sharing the grief and the spiritual experience of grief, and then three, also having them be able to be comfortable, not just for that one moment, but also to be able to keep coming to that person, to keep coming back to that sense of safety, to keep riding the boat, not just in the tributaries, but also in the calm waters of the open areas.
Okay, so I have two questions based on what you just said.
Okay.
I'm going to say them both and then I'll write them down so I don't forget them. But you can just pick one to start with, and then I'll ask the other one again. So the first is, how do we let people know that we're safe? How do we create those safe relationships? And then also, you said something about grief being like a spiritual experience. And can you just describe that more?
So I will go, I'm writing them down on my iPad here. Repeat the second question. I'm sorry, describe the spiritual experience of grief.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna go with the first one. How do we let people know that we are safe? Okay, so we're gonna do a little experiment. I want everybody to look at your camera. I want you to notice what your body does when I do this. Get a little tension.
Yeah, I wanted to giggle. Awkward. Yeah.
Yeah, it's awkward. It's very, very awkward. Now, how about this? How do we let people know that we are safe? What'd you notice? What'd you feel?
Yeah, I definitely felt welcome to be in the same place as you.
Yeah. Our nonverbals say so much of how much we want to connect. If I'm having this conversation with everyone here and I'm like this, I'm closed off. I'm pulled back. I don't want to experience whatever it is that you're experiencing. Whereas if I come in and I'm comfy, or I have my hands like this, or my head's cocked to the side a little bit, it's inquisitive. I want to know what your experience is. So I think what's important, and I don't think that it's taught very much, is how much nonverbals communicate engagement and how much nonverbals communicate safety. That's the first, because you guys and gals just proved it. If I give you this mad face and come at you like this, your body, the way that it's designed, is like, uh-oh, there's a threat. I'm going to go into fight, flight, freeze mode. Guess what, everybody? I'm going to protect you. Whereas when I came in soft, or I came in gentle, or I didn't say anything at all, your body already started communicating with you, saying, oh, this individual is not a threat.
Yeah.
This feels comforting. This feels inviting. I think I might be able to share with this person. So it sounds so elementary. It sounds so basic, but letting people know that we're safe, it happens. It begins with our nonverbals, in my opinion.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess I had never, I mean, I know that, but I never, I've experienced that, right? Like subconsciously, but have never thought about like, oh, if I want this person to feel safe with me, I need to be intentional about my body language and what I'm communicating without words.
On my Psychology Today profile for my practice, there's a little, Psychology Today has something set up where you could do like a 15-second video, like an introduction video. And a lot of the videos are, hi, my name is so-and-so.
Yeah.
I would love to help you. If you would like to give me the opportunity, call me at this number below.
Uh-huh.
I don't do that. I My Psychology Today profile is something along the lines of, "Hi,
That's great.
glad you're here." And there's a sign in my office that says gentle. And when I lean in, you can see gentle. And I said, "Hey, if you need some help, just holler at me." And then right before I close, I say, "Oh, you see that? Be gentle on yourself." I want to convey that
Mm,
safety just right off the bat, because if people are reaching out to a therapist, there's something going on,
yeah.
and that's a sacred space. And I don't want to ruin the opportunity to hold a sacred and holy space with that individual. And I think the same
Mhm.
applies when we're walking with somebody in their grief, or somebody is walking with us in our grief. We have to treat it as a sacred and holy space. A sacred and holy space. Um, Steve Austin,
Yeah.
Steve Austin, God bless him. He would take his shoes off if somebody was in his office with him, because he considered it sacred and holy space to be
Mm.
invited into that place.
So Steve is a someone that we
Steve,
both know,
yeah,
who died by suicide a little over a year ago now,
he
or
was
coming
close
up on a
to.
year,
I I think it's over a year.
a little bit over, yeah.
Yeah,
And was someone who was really a force to be reckoned with in the suicide prevention sphere, as someone who had dealt with suicidal ideation. And yeah, yeah, I can see him as a therapist really creating a special atmosphere.
yeah, yeah. A sacred and holy space of grief is. I've always held on to that imagery of. I mean, if we consider ourselves the church, the space of the church, um, I would hope that if you are walking into my space, that you treated as sacred and holy. And
Mm.
that I would hope that you would want me to treat your space as sacred and holy. It's it's an honor to be invited into those spaces, and to hold some very, very powerful and raw uh experiences.
Yeah, so it strikes me that you are talking about grief as this thing that is precious, even though it is painful.
Mm-hmm.
It is precious and um worth our tenderness, and seeing it as something, um yeah, I guess sacred is a good word for it, as opposed to, right, the general perception of grief is it's this horrible thing that we have to hide or we have to get over as soon as we can, and it is just like a stain on our lives, and meant to be avoided at all costs.
You asked me to describe the spiritual experience of grief. The spiritual experience of grief, it's like our walk. It's like our walk of faith. It's like our journey.
Mhm.
It's it can't be rushed. It can't have a timetable on it. And we get to put boundaries on it. We get to put boundaries on that spiritual experience. So, for example, my therapist used to tell me it takes as long as it takes. I'm like, yeah, that's taking too long. We need to
Yeah.
we need to speed this up a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, but in in taking as long as it takes, that spiritual experience is like you know, we're being refined in that. We're giving ourselves space to metabolize. We're giving ourselves the opportunity to process, not just internally, but also externally with other people.
Mm.
The spiritual experience of grief, I think we could put it as the same as, a spiritual experience of nourishment. We take in food, our bodies take out what it needs from the food, then our bodies get rid of what it doesn't need. And I think the same process can apply for that spiritual experience of grief. Okay, here it is. Okay, let me take what I need from this. Okay, and now let me discard the rest from this that I don't need.
Mm.
That process is not linear, and the process doesn't happen in a time frame that we would like to give it, or in a time frame where other people want to give it. That's a journey. That's a journey. I can give a timetable on the time that I left College Station. About, what time is it? 6:00 now. I left College Station at like 4:00. Well, I know I'm going to get to Fort Worth in about an hour and a half.
Mm-hmm.
I have arrived here. I'm done. Not much happened on that interstate other than me listening to a spiritual abuse podcast, and that was it.
Right.
If I treated my grief, as a beginning point, as an end point, I would probably walk away with the same attitude that I just shared with you of, I drove for an hour and a half. That was it. I'm done. I didn't get anything out of it.
Right. And when you say get something out of it, I know you well enough to know that you're not saying, looking for the silver lining, or, trying to, like people like to say, everything happens for a reason, or, right. You're not like trying to force it to be a good thing. Can you explain a little bit more of what do you mean, by like getting what you need out of it?
I think so. From my own personal grief experience, my grandmother passed away November 2nd of 2016. I was super, 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 super close to her. I like to brag that I was the only grandchild that didn't begin, my first name didn't begin with a cuss word in front of it. It usually was just Jaime, and that was it. So in that experience, she died in 2016. Here we are in 2022. The stages of grief: anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, denial, now meaning. Those for me that's the baseline for me.
Mm-hmm.
That's the foundation. I bounce back and forth between all these different stages, and sometimes all of them land all at once.
Mm-hmm.
But in my own personal journey and in my own personal experience, let's take anger, for example. Yes, I'm angry of how my grandmother left. I'm angry that she's no longer here. But at a deeper level, that anger reveals what mattered to me. And the anger showed, okay, my grandmother's presence really meant a lot. My grandmother's physical presence really meant a lot for me being here. And now I'm angry, and I get to express that anger in a healthy way,
Mm-hmm.
because I cared that she was here.
Mm-hmm.
With the other stages of grief, denial, depression, I can, especially depression, when I walk through that stage and I'm sad, well, I'm sad because I was glad that she was here.
Yeah.
It at a deeper level, these stages for me have revealed, oh my gosh, okay, these are the underlying things that I'm grieving.
Right.
So when I talk about that process, and when I talk about taking what I need and then discarding the rest, well, what I need from that anger stage of grief is the reminder of how much she meant to me.
Mm-hmm.
What I can discard is what I can discard is maybe at that moment, maybe I can discard the acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I can discard the acceptance and like, yeah, I really don't want to. Let me just sit with this here for a little bit.
Yeah.
I've heard this countless times. Grief is messy.
Mm-hmm.
Grief is messy. And since grief is messy, grief and spirituality can be messy. Spirituality is messy. It's not linear. And I tell this to my clients all the time, that whatever emotion, whatever body feeling you're feeling when it comes to grief, whatever you're experiencing is congruent to your experience. It's yours. It doesn't have to look like anybody else's.
That's so powerful. I know that's something that comes up a lot in the support groups, the foundation, that we want to feel like we're doing grief correctly, like we're doing it right, like we're, going through the process and we're coming to the end, and that we're, not wasting our grief, or we're not doing our loved one a disservice through how we're grieving.
Right.
But what a relief to remember that what we're experiencing is what we're experiencing, and that's okay.
Yeah. And that's okay. Something that I don't think is expressed as much as it should be when it comes to the process of grief or the experience of grief. Hey, that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Mm. Well, as we kind of wrap up our conversation and move into a discussion or question and answer, is there anything else that you feel like is important to kind of top off the conversation with?
In looking back in the past 20 to 25 minutes that we've been talking, it feels like we've kind of, been all over the place, that we could have taken one particular thing that we've talked about and spent a whole 30 minutes on just that one thing.
For sure.
But in the short amount of time that we've been together, in just this conversation that we're having, you and I, Becky, I think we've demonstrated what the grief process can look like at times.
Mm.
That in 20 to 25 minutes, we can go from here or here to absolute silence to, well, let me try to answer this question, because I think that's what we can go all over.
Yeah.
And I think we kind of like, quote unquote, acted out grief. And hopefully that the past 20, 25 minutes has given people permission to say, okay, I can experience however I want because this is mine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really great. And we have, approximately another 20 to 30 minutes. So if anyone out there, there's something that you would like to, if there's any one of those bits of conversation that you'd like to dive deeper into, feel free. At the bottom of the screen, there's like a reactions little symbol. And you can just tap the hand and it'll raise your hand. All right, Doreen, make sure that there you go. All right, go for it.
Greetings from Minnesota. beautiful here.
Oh,
I
good.
appreciate this conversation so much. I had a really rough day today. My son died of suicide on 4/24 of 2021.
I'm so sorry.
Pending a divorce, 2 little kids, and now we're getting pictures of her new boyfriend, and it's breaking my heart.
That's a lot.
And I don't know why. I don't know why it's breaking my heart, but it is. It's like the baby's only 6 months old, and my son's only been gone a year and a couple of months.
Yeah. I mean, I can speak from my own experience of losing my husband while I was pregnant. And each milestone is hard because like you feel like that person should be there. And you know that the way that it is isn't the way that it should be. And that's really
Yeah.
painful.
She had told him she didn't love him anymore while she was 3 months pregnant, and she had moved on.
Mm.
He lived at our house for the last 10 days, and I watched him struggle. And so it's like, how did you just move that fast into a brand new relationship and having a man snuggling up my grandchildren? It's not my son.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, Doreen, I so appreciate you sharing that with us. That is, I imagine it's a mixture of emotions. It's sad, it's hard, it's full of anger, sometimes maybe some rage, the how can you, the all of these different questions. And what I would say to you is keep asking those questions. They're highly appropriate.
Of why? The question of why.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Why is this happening? We live in a culture that teaches us to hurry up.
Yeah.
We live in a culture that says if you do steps 1, 2, 3, and 4, you'll get your answer. And that's just not, there's nothing spiritual about that. And at the same time, it's very shaming. Because if I'm not meeting these expectations of step 1, 2, 3, and 4, okay, I'm at step 4. How come I'm not past this yet? Oh, there must be something wrong with me. I must not be doing this right. No, what you just shared and the emotions that you trusted us with and the invitation into your sacred and holy space, that is yours. And you get to experience however you want. I would keep encouraging you to allow the self-love that you just demonstrated to all of us, the self-love that you just demonstrated to all of us by asking those hard questions. I would encourage you to keep showing yourself that self-love internally and keep giving yourself permission to ask those questions because they're fair questions. They're right questions. They're appropriate questions. And they're brave questions. Brave questions.
Yeah.
So it's like I feel like my chest is caving in.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, grief is hard work and painful.
I do yoga about 4 or 5 times a week, and so I was like tired of my chest caving in, so I went swimming for an hour. And it helps, but it doesn't take it away.
But blessings to you for responding to your body and listening to your body, and your body saying, hey, Doreen, I need this from you right now. Okay, what do you need? Can we go swimming? Sure. Or can we go do yoga? Can we do whatever? Sure. Will it help to feel better in the meantime? Absolutely it will. Will it completely take it away? It may or may not. But maybe that hole that's there, and the managing of the hurt that's there, is a reminder of how much you care, and how much you do care, and how much you do love.
And that's what I got out of what you were saying, is that I had worked with a therapist a couple months after my son took his life, and he told me that anger was bad and that it would ruin my kidneys and my liver. And so it's like, oh, now I shouldn't be angry that my 28-year-old son took his life. I shouldn't be angry because it's going to ruin my kidney and my liver. So that I'm like, so now what the hell do I do with it if I can't be angry?
The anger reveals what matters, and what matters to you is the love for your son. And the anger that's manifesting in your body that you are paying attention to is a gift that's been given to us so we can nurture and care for ourselves. So, sister, you be as angry as you want. You be as angry as you want.
So I can journal it. I bought a baseball bat so that I can just go, hey, you bitch, you treated my son like a piece of trash.
Yes. Yep.
And just, but not to hurt anybody, but just to
Right.
scream it out.
Right.
Yep.
Doreen, thank you so much for sharing that with us.
It helped a lot. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Susan.
Becky, I see Susan has her hand up.
Okay, sorry.
There we go.
I sometimes forget how all of this Zoom works.
I feel like the unmute button moves around.
So thank you. This was really, really a great talk, and I'm really glad that I was able to get on Zoom. Usually I have to listen to them later. But I just wanted to share a little bit about my story with my spirituality, because my grief journey goes back. Matter of fact, tomorrow is 51 years since my mom died. So I was a teenager, and I was the fourth of 6 kids with a dad who was pretty angry before she died. Let's just leave it that way. So, but for me personally, I got so angry at my mother for dying, and at God for allowing her to die. Or, you know, if God has a plan, why is that plan mean she's going to die when she has 6 children, age 20 down to age 5? And I was afraid to talk about it because it was before hospice. It was before, you know, so anyway, I didn't. And I thought, because I really believed if I told anybody I was angry at my mother for dying, it didn't make sense to me. But I knew that was what I felt. But if I told them that, they put me at the state hospital. You know, I really, truly believed that. So I didn't say a word to anybody. And I went to church and pretended that I was listening or that I liked it there, but I didn't. I was really angry at God. So I went to college a few years later, and I'm a math person. I'm not, you know, so I took a social problems class, and I did a paper on living with terminally ill, and I read Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's book on death and dying, and it saved me. You know, truly, she's so my hero. You know, because I realized I wasn't crazy. And then once I got out of high school, I did stay away from the church for a while. I was married in the church. I had kids. My firstborn has cerebral palsy. So again, I got really angry at God, but this time I knew it was okay. And I knew I had to go through all those stages, but I thought I would go through them once and life would be fine. He's 42 now. I've gone through him a few times. But my real lessons with grief when my kids were little, I had another son. I did get back to church, and in church that I loved dearly, and loved the minister, and he was there for a lot of years. As a matter of fact, he just retired last year, so he was with me through the worst grief I've ever been through, and that is that my younger son in 2018 was diagnosed with stage 4 brain cancer, and he died in 2019.
So sorry.
So, thank you. That was, wow. I was so grateful I knew, for me, what it did for my faith was, I know my God would not do that. He would not say, Justin Nyland, I'm giving you brain cancer. That's not a God that I believe in or I depend on. But I do know, and with the help really of my minister, that he put the right people in Justin's life. He married a woman who is an absolute angel. Their wedding picture, the way the sunlight is shining in, they were married in the mountains in Utah. It looks like she has angel wings on. And when they got married in 2015, we were like, that was their dads who had both passed away, letting them know they see that they're married and they're happy. And later, my minister, he pointed out to me, he says, maybe God was letting you know that Mary is truly Justin's angel, and she was beautiful with him through the whole thing. And it really helped me to understand that, God is not there for me. I only speak for me in just the bad times, and I don't go to church so that to get to, I might not need the help today, but I might need it tomorrow, and I might need it next year. And that's where my faith comes in for me, is that I got to keep at it all the time. And I'm going to have slips back in my faith, in my grieving, in all of it. But I got to keep doing the work, because I got to get through it, and I got to learn, and I got to grow, so, I'm retired, and I still have my disabled son living with me, and I'm just still going forward, but I'm so happy to have a forum like this and the spirituality group to be able to talk about grief and the spirituality together, that, because it's been very important for me. And when you talked before about the silence and just being there, when I was at work, when my son was sick, and then when I went back after he died, one particular friend in particular, she'd walk by my office and she'd see me, and she might look at me, and she would just put her hands praying and, let me know that I'm in her prayers, and she knows there's nothing that she could say to make it better. It doesn't, it's just what we have to go through. And even in your reading in the beginning, Becky, when you talk about the flowers, really, as I thought about it, how they grow all year, but then they go dormant, and so do we. And we might come back blooming better the next time. And maybe sometimes we might bloom not so good this year, but, so I'm so grateful. And I have to say, 3 years ago this month, I walked into Brian's Healing Hearts for my first support group, and I just felt the biggest hug. I knew that was where I needed to be. That was like 6 months after my son passed, and I've been there since. So thank you for doing this. It was really, really great evening. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And Susan mentioned the group. There's actually a grief and spirituality. It's called Faith and Grieving support group. And there's a new kind of group cohort starting up October 4th. And it's kind of similar to a little bit of what Jaime was talking about, in that as you go through grief, you kind of recognize the things that are inside of yourself and what you care about and what is important to you. And so it's what we call group spiritual direction. And so if that's something that you are interested in, you can go to the website where you signed up for this, or you can send me an email at admin@brianshealinghearts.org. You can contact, the foundation in any way, and we can get you set up to join the group if this is the kind of conversation that you'd like to have regularly. It'll run for 8 weeks, starting October 4th. So does anyone else have a question or something they'd like to share? Oh, there we go. Go ahead, Robin.
Muted.
There you go.
Yeah, there we go.
Uh-oh. Sorry, I might have muted you by accident when you were
Okay.
unmuting. There we go.
Myself, I'd like to just share that I appreciate everybody that is here and is listening, because people around you day to day, whether you're at work, walking down the street, in the grocery store, people don't know what you've gone through, and the grief and the loss and all the different stages of grief. But when we all attend grief support like this here, I'm thankful that everybody is here and that I have somebody to talk to and also share our different stories and our journeys. And this is where it helps me deep inside my heart. We talk about anger. I feel angry at times. And I know I'm lashing out or not being very friendly at times. And people don't really know. They don't know why you're like that. And sometimes you catch yourself and sometimes you don't. But it's groups like this that I appreciate the listening and being able to talk freely about your grief and the journey that you're going through. And I just want to thank everybody for being here and allowing me to attend also. Thank you. It means a lot. Not everybody listens or they know what you're going through. So now I when somebody's acting a little bit different or with anger or upset, I think to myself, what is that person going through? And I have more patience and I gain my patience with that person. So it's made me think a lot about others. So with that, thank you. And I'll put myself on mute again. Okay.
I'm gonna
Thanks.
pop
Thanks.
real quick into the chat is the link to sign up for the grieving and faith support group if anyone is interested. Go ahead.
Thanks for
Jaime,
sharing.
sorry.
Thanks for sharing that, Robin. I think two of the most important words that we can share with each other, especially with shared experiences like grief, is me too. It's when somebody else shares their story of grief. And right now we're looking at all these different squares here, but like when Susan was talking, I found myself saying, oh yeah, me too. Or when Doreen was talking about anger, yeah, me too. And then the gratitude, Robin, that you just expressed for just being able to talk and to have people that understand, that have that collective, oh yeah, me too. I get this. I think those words are so comforting when they come from somebody else in a shared experience, because it makes you feel so much less alone, because grief done alone is painful. It is so painful.
and to be able to walk with somebody else in their pain, and again saying, oh yeah, me too. Those two words just bring so much healing, at least for me. So I appreciate you expressing your gratitude towards the group and for having the courage to share that.
Mhm.
Just have one more quick question if I can ask, if there's enough time.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd made a phone call to my yoga teacher today, and I was just, trying to get the yoga spirituality philosophy on seeing these most recent pictures of Tanner's wife with her new boyfriend, and that she's had for since the baby was 6 months old. And he'd said to me, he says, Doreen, we don't have control over other people's actions and decisions. He says, so there's a level of acceptance that needs to come. So when I'm going through this experience of what I'm experiencing, how do you get to a level of acceptance?
I
So
think
is that saying what she's doing is okay, that I'm supposed to just be okay with it?
my wife is on here. She's the one that has Sandy Coy with the two girls that are there. And I tell her this all the time, and she affirms and validates it for me, that words and definitions matter. The definition of a word is profound. And so when we look at acceptance in the grief process, acceptance is just the acceptance of the reality of the loss. So it's not an acceptance of, it's not an acceptance or an excusing in your case, Doreen, the behavior. You don't have to accept that if you don't want to. But I think the acceptance that your yoga instructor may have been talking about was just the acceptance of what you see as, okay, that's reality. Just like I can accept that this wall is white. That's all I can accept about it. I don't care about what it's behind. I don't care what's, what kind of material it's painted on, nothing. I just accept that it's white and that's it. In the terms, in let's say, let me try to bring up another example of alcoholic and addict. I can accept that the alcoholic and addict has a drug problem, but I don't have to accept the behavior that the addict and alcoholic is experiencing. That makes sense?
Yep. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mhm. That's a really great clarification that, yeah, that there's a difference between accepting what is real and what is happening and agreeing with it or condoning it. And that we all have different grief journeys. Your daughter-in-law is dealing with her own grief journey, and it looks different than if you were in her spot. And that's another thing that makes grief so messy and so hard, is that we all need different things and we all are in different places, even if we're grieving the same person. Any other thoughts or questions? Well, Jaime, thank you so much. This has been a lot, a lot to process, and a lot, like you said, we've kind of gone all over the place. But I think this is a really good jumping off point for a lot of us to kind of think about things in a different way than we've thought about them before. And a good place to start asking new and different questions as part of the process, as part of the recognizing what is our grief showing us, and who are we becoming? Jaime just put in the chat, if you don't have that open, grieving spiritually is courageously turning inward and walking into the caverns of our souls where the grief resides. That's scary stuff. It's really scary.
Very,
So,
very scary. And
yeah.
it's even scarier when we go at it alone.
Mm-hmm.
It's even scarier when we go at it alone. And I think this group represents, you know, it gives hope in the collective of what it means to grieve collectively, and that also to experience the humanity of other people's grief. And I mean, I've in just listening into the stories that people have shared, and then I mean, I'm a therapist, I'm watching body language. I can see that there's hurt. I can see that there's, you know, a mixture of joy, some anger, some sadness, and all those different emotions and feelings and thoughts and sensations. And it's, again, I express my gratitude to everybody here for inviting me into that sacred and holy space, because you don't have to, but that's it's a brave thing of clicking on and listening to some stranger speak on a really, really hard topic.
Mm-hmm.
Before we close, I'm gonna click. Wait, hold on. Let's copy. I'm putting in the chat some resources of. So in the chat, I put that there's a couple of people on Twitter who do really good grief work. Jan Jowen and Mandy K. Park. In fact, Mandy is here with us
Hi,
tonight.
Mandy.
The good follows on Twitter, on social media. April, I can't say April's name right. April 5th. She wrote a book called The Sacred Pulse, and there's one chapter in that book that is called The Requiem of Grief, and it's a really, really powerful chapter. But the whole book is just acts of worship through the things that we do every day. Another book about lament, because I think the church does a poor job of teaching lament and what it means to lament. Dark Clouds, Deep Mercy by Mark Vrogop is a really good resource. And then also the turning inward and walking into those caverns. Lisa Colon DeLay wrote a book called The Wild Land Within. And it's a book about these wounds that are within, that what she terms our internal landscape. And our internal landscape has the beauty of, you know, a forest or a beach or anything like that, but it also has these spaces that are deep and dark that we really don't want to go into sometimes. But that the way that she writes that book gives that courage to begin that journey into those chasms, and to begin, you know, working through those spaces that need the healing. So those would be my recommendations for good follows. Thanks,
Yeah,
Mandy,
and
for putting that. Yeah, Lisa Colon DeLay is also, she's also on Twitter.
I will link to all of those people and books and everything in the email that'll go out with the replay of tonight.
Yeah, and I'll also send to Becky their Instagram handles. That way you'll have them as well.
Yeah,
So.
I think I follow all of them. So yeah, we'll make sure that you can get connected with all of those people that are doing really, really good work. So, all right. We're going to have our benediction, which is a fancy word for saying closing. This is the one that we used in July. And I just felt like it was so fitting to use again for this group. So tonight's final benediction, it's by an unknown author. I wish I knew who had written it. May the divine bless and keep us. May they grant us strength to live through troubled times. May they fill us with grace equal to every need and a peace which passes all understanding. May they grant us the wisdom and the will to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk with humility. And may they surround us with their love and lead us in the path of everlasting life. Next month's speaker in October, it'll be Monday, October 10th, is Charlotte Donlin, and she's going to be talking on the loneliness and longing of grief. Charlotte is a writer and a spiritual director. Her writing has appeared in the Washington Post, Catapult, The Millions, and elsewhere. Her first book is The Great Belonging: How Loneliness Leads Us to Each Other. You can subscribe to her newsletter and connect with her on Twitter and Instagram. And I can say for sure that Charlotte's book is a real game changer when it comes to a lot of the things that we've talked about tonight in connecting and in noticing and observing. It's a really, really, truly wonderful book. And that's called The Great Belonging by Charlotte Donlin. So that's what we have for tonight. Thank you all so much for coming. I really, really am grateful for these. Oh, sorry, my son is texting me, asking me to extend his screen time on his phone. I'm just really grateful for this time each month to gather and really dig into those things that can be painful and difficult, but that are so rewarding and healing and really wonderful when we decide to be vulnerable with them. So thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Jaime. And there will be an email going out with the replay as well as all of the resources that were mentioned. And you can feel free to get in touch with me, Becky at admin@brianshealinghearts.org, or just any of the general emails or whatnot for the organization. So thank you everyone and have a lovely evening.
Thank you.